Okay, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, October 20th, 2021, and we're going to get started here with our pre-market analysis on the S&P 500 futures market. Had a pretty good rally yesterday. Just want to quickly point out here how we talked about this was kind of our first area of interest for a bounce just after the open when it was really choppy. We got this push out and this pullback, and this was literally the first area that we were interested in finding a bounce. And then we talked about finding resistance up around 0650. Market bounced actually to the tick off 94.75, which is that 50% retracement level to the tick, and went ahead and pushed right into our 0650, which was the 27 extension. We also had an eye level sitting right there as well. And the market for just about an hour, hour and a half basically sat here trying to get through 0650, 07, eventually broke through and then used it as support for quite a while. But it looks like the bears kind of took over and broke through there, but eventually continued to carry up, to the upside by the end of the day there. So just wanted to point out that was kind of the main level we were watching once we broke out of this area. Ended up working perfectly right to exactly where we expected. So just wanted to pat ourselves on the back there and go ahead and we'll just jump up to our ultra high time frames here and take a look at what they are saying this morning. So that quarterly, again, looking very, very strong. We talked about these really nice wicks. If you look back to previous candlesticks, you can see whenever we had a big wick to the downside, there ended up being some nice continuation to the upside following that candle. And so right now, assuming by the end of November this candle closes like this, we will have a similar situation there. Outside of that, again, just looking very strong, no signs of exhaustion on the quarterly, and also over here on our monthly chart, everything's looking very strong. We get down to our weekly and same thing, looking very strong. We actually have two beautiful bullish divergences off the most local lows that we made here back at the beginning of October. And ever since then, we're now up over 200 points from the lows and just about to the all-time high here coming into this morning. So we'll talk a little bit more about where we are in the market here as we dial down to the shorter time frames. But main thing to point out from the ultra high time frame perspective of the quarterly, monthly, and weekly is we look very strong, and there are no signals or indications of exhaustion in the current push. When we come down to our daily, our first high time frame here, again, agreement with the weekly, with the bullish divergences off the lows of the pullback that we made back going into the beginning of October. So nice bullish continuation from those signals. And right now, as we continue to push higher and right into the all-time high, no indications of exhaustion from our daily perspective either. So essentially every high time frame is telling us we expect higher. We don't have any signs of any type of turnaround. Now this is going to change. The story starts to get a little more complicated as we get into the other high time frames that we look at, our 4-hour and our hourly, because on the 4-hour here, I know there's a lot of lines, so it might be a little bit difficult to see, but we do have a really clear bearish divergence off the previous daily high that we're going to see as we dial down. However, what I want to point out is we kind of got that back here at the kind of in the beginning of Globex from, I don't know, the day or two before this. We got it, and then as the market continued to push throughout yesterday, we had arguments for bearishness. And so I guess what I'm trying to say here is, in such a strong bullish push with so much bullish momentum, even though we do have such an important time frame, being, this being the 4-hour, even though we have the bearish case on that, it's still, the bulls could jump right back in and continue to chug here. So we want to keep in mind that we do see a significant time frame with a bearish signal up at the highs from yesterday, but keeping it in mind in the context of the type of market we're in right now. Now, to complicate things here, not only do we have the bearish case off the previous daily high, but in the overnight session off the overnight low, we then got the counter signal for a bullish divergence. So we've got a nice, and for those who were in our study session, I believe it was last week's study session, we focused on our hidden divergences. And as you can see here on the 4-hour, we pushed to a higher low compared to previous lows, but on RVI we pushed to make a lower low. So we've got a nice hidden bullish divergence on this pullback off the bearish divergence from the previous daily high. And so off of our overnight low right now, we do have a nice 4-hour bullish divergence. And I would argue in this type of scenario where every single high time frame has no indication of exhaustion, I would argue we want to lean a little bit more on the hidden divergences on pullbacks than we do want to lean on those classic exhaustion patterns off highs. So keep in mind there is a possibility, especially because we do see the bearish signal up here on the shorter time frames as well. It could pull back, but we are starting to build the counter argument off of the overnight low. So let's just dial down to these shorter time frames, and this is the bottom end of our high time frame spectrum here on the 60-minute, and you can see again as we pushed we got these bearish signals. So back here it did get a decent pullback, so you could have gotten a good trade out of that, but then outside of that, as it continued to push, we got bearish signal, bearish signal, bearish signal. So as we push, we see it, and again it leads to these little shallow, you can see the red candle there. Whenever we get to those exhaustion patterns, you can see a very shallow pullback here. Actually you did get just about 10-20 points, but there's no follow-through for the signal. And so we see it again, 60-minute previous daily high, bearish divergence, but then on the pullback to our overnight low, kind of like what we were talking about here on the 4-hour, we have the counter argument for bulls. And so I would argue we need to lean a little bit more on the bullish divergence off the overnight low because of the context and because of what every single high time frame says, which is there's no exhaustion in the current move. Again, anything's possible, and we need to heed the signals. So if they do start to sell off, we do have the 4-hour, and then coming down here to the hourly, and we'll see it on the 30 and the 10. So a lot of bearish signals on a lot of time frames. But like I said, keep the context in mind. We want to be buying pullbacks in a bullish push. Let's go over to our intermediate time frames here, our 30 and our 10, and they're essentially agreeing with what we're seeing on all the other time frames. We've got the bearish case off the previous daily high, and we've got a nice bullish divergence off the overnight low right around midnight Pacific time. So 3 a.m. on the East Coast, about midnight on the Pacific is when we got the bullish argument again from the 4-hour, and now we're all the way down to the 30-minute. And outside of that, don't think there's much else to say here from a 30-minute perspective. So let's go ahead and jump down to our 10-minute and just take a look. There you can see really nice bullish divergence there right around midnight, just before midnight. And the previous daily high, don't think there's the most beautiful, I guess what you could say is, assuming that this is the same level, you had a little subsequent bar type setup right there. So there is that, but really nice bullish divergence, very clear there on the 10-minute off the overnight low. So as you guys can see, essentially we have the 4-hour all the way down to the 10-minute giving us a bearish argument from the previous daily high and a bullish argument from the overnight low. And because of the context, again, when you zoom out and also when you look at your 4 highest time frames, they all have no signs of exhaustion, which tells me we might want to lean a little bit more on the bullish case this morning off the overnight low, expecting them to go ahead and push through the previous daily high and continue going. Just want to keep in mind though, because of all the bearishness off the previous daily high, it could potentially follow through despite everything that we're seeing going on in the market. And just keep in mind as well, if we jump back to the 10-minute here, that we have typically in strong pushes, you do get a very strong push, and then things start to round out kind of, so you kind of get this steep slope up, and then it starts to kind of round out and level out. Sometimes that leads to a little bit of a pullback, but in some cases it just kind of goes sideways, and then bam, breaks out to the upside and continues going till the next area of some resistance goes sideways and then, breaks out again. Now keep in mind, we're right up near the all-time high. I believe the all-time high for this contract was 45.40. All right, and in today's market, in current market conditions, we are just about a few seconds or a few minutes away from hitting that, if there was going to be a strong push like we've seen in some of the other previous days here. So that's kind of where we're at. Keep in mind that on the pullbacks, we have plenty of really good levels to lean on. We have our eye levels, we have our prediction points, we have some of the important daily levels. Also keep in mind that holding above 0975 would be the best case for the bulls this morning, but also coming down and holding 50% of the previous day at 94.50 also would be a good case for the bulls. These are two kind of lines in the sand that we watch, and typically when we hold above either one, we'll have that bullish case. But breaking below them, both of them, and then obviously breaking below the previous daily low, not really a great case for the bulls. Outside of that, as we push, remember, we're pushing in to the all-time highs, and so we kind of have to go back to literally go all the way back to just at the beginning of September here, and it is a little messy on the chart. There are some drawings, but we came up to 1750, right? So right into this little area, and if you look, there's really not much else kind of in the way. I do think that the prediction point here at 24, and keep in mind we also have an eye level sitting right on top of that as well. We have that sitting there, and then we have this area right around 31, and then we have an eye level just a tick or two in front of that. Those are the only two things, once we get above 1750, the previous daily high, that in my opinion make any sense for any type of resistance. And then we're right up into, when we actually have an eye level sitting right around this 35, 75, 36 area. We have that, and then literally the all-time high, which I think is 45.40, and that's it. It looks like we could potentially chug through all of that this morning if the bulls are strong. So I think that's really all we have for our YouTube audience and for anyone else watching. And I think we're going to go ahead and jump to our members section and get the eye levels on the chart, start looking at some potential trades going into the open. So I just have to go